Transhumanism and Fauci jabs. What do they have in common? Well, let's dig into that. It looks like China has been doing this for a long time. And all these people that have this, like, these companies where you can send in your samples to see if you've got the COVID. Were these actually DNA harvesting facilities to tailor these things to be used in a nefarious way? That's another question at hand. We don't know, but we'll dig into this and I'll let you make your own judgment. I do know that it's been alleged that China for quite some time has been using this kind of CRISPR technology to edit certain genes and move them in places to where they can build either really superhumans or vice versa, the other way around, just messing with things. They say that some of the people that's been, the Chinese military has been utilizing this technology to build sort of a super military of people who are super strong, super smart. And that could be a thing. But I ran across a mainstream article video that's just like a Fox News, it's on your regular pop-up ads where they brought a 13,000 year extinct wolf back into society through this whole genetic technology. And everybody knows that what they revealed to us is quite old. And so if you'll stick around, watch this whole video, because this is going to be a key eye opener, especially for people on the other side of the aisle that you may, interact with at the water cooler. And it's something that you can fast forward through all this, but show them this stuff. Show them, say, look, this is where we're at. Why don't you understand what's really going to quit? Maybe possibly lining up for some of these things that they want to give to you for free. It's kind of weird. Free doesn't always mean it's good. So guys, stick around, hang out, and enjoy. Thank you guys. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Teeing off to this, the look on this guy's face is like, I'm hurting, it's the pains. No, it's just you realizing humanity's moving in a very strange direction. This video is talking about how they brought back a wolf that was 13,000 years extinct. I'm sure this won't end terrible at all, but check this out.
We turn now to that remarkable scientific breakthrough. 13,000 years after the last dire wolf walked the earth, scientists say they've now brought them back. Here's our chief national correspondent back up and with the video tonight.
Tonight, a howl 13,000 years in the making. In a first for science, biotech company Colossal Biosciences says it brought the extinct direwolf back to life, a species that hasn't walked the earth since the Stone Age.
The direwolf is the first de-extinct species.
Well known from HBO's hit show Game of Thrones, ABC News given exclusive access into Colossal's lab in Dallas, where scientists are using genes from gray wolves to create dire wolves.
We've taken a gray wolf genome, a gray wolf cell, which is already genetically 99.5% identical to dire wolves, and we've edited those cells at multiple places in its DNA sequence to contain the dire wolf version of the DNA. That animal looks like a dire wolf, it will behave like a dire wolf, and it is a dire wolf.
Now, 7 months old, dire wolves Romulus and Remus eating well and getting bigger every day.
And David, the company tells us they're not stopping there. They plan to have woolly mammoths roaming the earth again by 2028. But critics argue that this de-extinction could harm fragile ecosystems.
Yeah, definitely. I'm kind of in agreement with some of the scientists who might be sounding the alarm on this. It's very, very dangerous to do this. Think about just the invasiveness of those carp that got let loose in those rivers that weren't supposed to be invasive, and they ended up kind of taking over the whole species and then annihilating a whole ecosystem, and it did it very rapidly because it had not adapted to what was about to be introduced to it. And what happens if you have like a situation that's sort of like that, the movie Jurassic Park, where they getting us geared up for something? Possibly that could be a thing, like, well, we can't really get humanity with they've woke up to the jabs, they don't want to take those, so let's just bring on the prehistoric creatures and let those eat the people. I don't know. But, they say, there's not enough room for the people on this earth. We don't have enough infrastructure support. Well, let's bring a bunch of big old animals that just eat everything. Go ahead. That's a really good idea. This sounds like a terrible idea. Unfortunately, they're so cute. So they're like, you got these stupid lefties who, vote for Biden and Kamala Harris. Like, this is a great idea. We're dumb as hell. And so this is what we've got now. We've got that. So in my opinion, and you did hear key words, We used gene editing tools to be able to modify the genetics genomes in the sequence so that we could bring this back to this. They would never do this to humans. This is not a. So this should make you, or not, this should help you transition into this Joe Rogan video so it's not so hard to swallow. Here you go. I'm just going to let the video speak for itself. Very interesting content, very informative, and I think everybody should get something out of this. And maybe, just like I said, it's a great idea to try to share this as much as possible. Talk about this amongst your folks. Here you go.
China, Russia,
it is getting weird. Like CRISPR and these genome engineering tools are outside of the bottle. They're out. It's like the genie out of the bottle, right? It's like it's out there. You can't put it back in. I think that more and more people in other countries are going to be doing things with these technologies for humans. That's why Colossal just said, we will never do anything for humans. If someone else wants to use our technologies for humans, we'll evaluate it.
But that gets so weird, right? Like the China story. Like, can you explain to people what they did? They said they were inoculating them from HIV, which is
They actually were
very
engineering.
suspect.
They were engineering babies in editing their embryos to confer a resistance to HIV. Now, still to this day, so they were cloning them, and then they were genetically modifying them. And so they're doing lots of things that are, there's a general moratorium in the world on some of these things around humans. Anything that's considered a germline edit. So anything that could be passed on to the next generation, right? So things. So if you engineer something into the genome, the fear is, from a germline. So all your cells in your body are somatic cells, except for your like egg or sperm. Those are germ cells. So anything that could be affected into the germline, so that you pass it on to the next generation, that could be like, umbrella corporation type moment, right? So
Right.
we don't want that.
Well, the scary thing was they didn't just do that. They also edited something that would allow the child to have much higher intelligence.
Well, so that part's like that part's quoted under debate. There's people that say that happened. There's people that say it doesn't happen. If you look at BGI, or Beijing Genomics Institute, right? They did this thing that, from a nefarious perspective, was brilliant. From a nefarious perspective, is also terrifying. During COVID, they're like, we'll do all the COVID testing for you for free. We'll do all this COVID testing for you for free. No worries. Just send us your data. We'll do it all for free. You just want to help the world, right? We'll work with the World Health Organization. Just send us all your samples from all your countries, everything. And publicly, the CEO of BGI has said, which is funded by the CCP, has said that they are looking at genes with humans. They are looking at what makes humans more intelligent. They don't shy away from this. This is not like some, conspiracy like theory, like, is it a Sasquatch or is it just a man in an ape suit? This is something that is very real. They are openly saying, we are sequencing as much as we can of the world population, looking for genes for intelligence, and we will act on that. Like that's not a hidden thing. So that is
But
the
they
problem.
supposedly did with these children. How
Supposedly-
old are these kids now?
I mean, that would have. When did that happen, Jay? It was, yeah, so they've been like 6 or 7.
Oh, and are they already winning chess championships?
Yeah, so I'm
We
not.
should find out.
Yeah.
We should.
I like that at the end there. But so if this is happening in China, then okay, let's look at it like this here. We do know that China's not a free, like, you can't just, if you live in China, you just can't come to the United States. You've got to be allowed to by the CCP. This is kind of one of the reasons why I do not eat Chinese food, because most of the Chinese restaurants are not owned by Americans. They're not these people this is the conglomerate of the CCP. Now, I hate to say this to people who love your Chinese food, but you can look this up, but a lot of these restaurants that are owned by Chinese people are sent to this country for probably gosh knows what, but they post up in small towns. They're allowed to leave China. They're allowed to run their business, but typically it's a circuit of the CCP, which means they have their hand in on something, which means that there is some form of CCP influence possibly in your community. Just to think about that. Just a little tidbit of an alleged ability. I can't confirm or deny that because I don't, I'll let you guys make that choice. But this is something that has been going on longer than what they said allegedly. I think that, you could go back to some of the things that were talked about at the beginning of these introduced jabs that Fauci decided to come up with. And this is very alarming. It's very alarming for humanity. But back to what I was saying about people not being able to leave China. If they are able to genetically modify people in China, if they are, I don't know if they are or not, guys. This is all alleged. then they don't want that kind of that kind of superiority to leave that country unless it's allowed to under very controlled circumstances. Or better yet, if they could, let's say they genetically modify a group of people that they do allow to leave from China, what would that introduce to the American society? Could those be bad genes which would destabilize our genetic sequence to make us lesser human? Would that be a form of biological warfare? And this is all just questions. This is not fact, but this is something I think about quite dearly. Just imagine that. The fact that they can genetically modify somebody to be more intelligent, more resistant to certain things, or could they do it the exact opposite? Send these people into the country, let them fornicate with citizens, and then create a human that's way less superior to what they have. The possibilities are endless because for one thing, they'd love to see what they can do with science. They're in it for the long game, and they think it's funny, allegedly. So this is something to think about when you're eating your chicken on your your chicken on a stick or whatever you want to. It looks like cat. Anyway, so let's dig into the Judge Boasberg thing. This is going to be quite interesting, guys. Here we go. Yes, breaking huge win. Supreme Court vacates Judge Boasberg's orders barring Trump from deporting Venezuelan gang members under the Alien Enemies Act. I talked about this a bunch. It definitely is something that Trump has the ability to use. This law was put in for this very reason. If you look at the history of how these Trinidad gangs kind of trailed their way up to the United States, they were all pretty much a prison dump. Then they were all empowered and given certain instructions to come to the United States, and they all conglomerated in certain areas. This is where I think that, I don't know if it was out of good intention or if it was intentional, but certain governors in red states were sending all of these illegals to blue states. They said, well, if you're going to bring them all in, you're going to have to deal with them. And that could have been a complete miscalculation on the fact that, well, I don't blame them. Maybe we don't want them around here, but they were there anyways. But they, the blue states were like, good, because our agenda is pretty much to create total chaos. And so, yes, please send us all of these from wherever they're coming from so that we can, categorize them, put them in certain areas. We'll facilitate their food, their housing. That way they can organize, and then we're going to release them out into the wild so that they can, run amok. And maybe that was just a complete miscalculation or a strategic. Maybe the 5D chess players and the globalists knew that that's what they would do, and it was all they played right into their plans. I don't know. I know that right now as we speak, though, in an unsigned order, the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday vacated Judge Boasberg's orders barring the Trump administration's Judge Boasberg barring the Trump administration's removal of Venezuelan gang members under the Alien Enemy Act. Now he can't do that. And last month, Judge Boasberg granted a temporary restraining order. We know all about that. And basically, he's not able to do that now. They've removed his ability to do that. And Boasberg threatened to hold Trump officials in contempt. He was really pushing hard on this. So now that he's taken out of the playing field of this, does this now remove some of the conflict of interest on some of the hard things he's trying to do with that stupid Signal app? They say that was, strategically infiltrated and released secrets to the foreign people and this, that, and the other, which we all know that this was nothing to do with Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump, or anybody. This was all a strategic attack to try to delegitimize the people that, they're trying to get Pete Hegseth, removed from his, what his position is as the military Department of Defense. Now, that could be, this is good. This is good for saving, this part of the, what we're trying to do here. But could this be a player for saying, well, he's not a conflict of interest anymore because of what's going on with this. Now he can work this case against Trump and Pete Hegseth. Something to think about, guys. But we'll take the wins. We'll deal with it as it comes along. Maybe between now and that time, we could actually work on getting some of these activist judges out of the way. I'm not for impeaching people because you disagree with their legal standing, but and so they say, well, what are you doing here? No, what's happening here is clearly activist judges acting outside of the law. And when you do that, you can't just accept their ruling because it's not legitimate. You can see that there's conflict of interest outside of just what they think is right. They have financial, they're adhering to that. They also are beholden to some of the organizations who put them in the position they're at. And you just have to work on those aspects. And there's definitely ways to prove that. Anyways, guys, good news, crazy news. Don't forget to, like I say, hit the like. Help me get this video out. Let's try to build this up. You guys are wonderful. See you guys soon. I'm out.